All right. Hello. Welcome to What the Funnel Marketing Podcast. Today, my guest is someone I deeply admire, a marketing strategist who doesn't just preach marketing, but lives it through his own brand. Joe Escobedo, not Escobar, also known as Joe GPT, advises Fortune 500s, hosts the B2B Marketing Asia podcast, and teaches the next generation of marketers across Asia's top universities. He's trained leaders from LinkedIn, Oracle, Salesforce, and has built integrated campaigns for global brands like Adobe, MasterCard, INSEAD, and Nike. Like the true polymath, he's also recently launched his new book, How to Get a Job in Asia, something I think is relevant to many of us. And today we're diving into what it truly means to be a multi-hyphenated marketer, someone who blends strategy and human connection to build both brands and careers. Joe, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, I'm so excited to have our conversation and to learn from you. So I guess I'll dive right in. So you've served multiple big brands like Adobe, MasterCard, INSEAD, Nike, and more. What are some of your best insights from such big brands when it comes to testing and scaling?
So very good question. So I think one thing that they try to do is follow the model of the 70-20-10 framework when it comes to budgeting. So 70% of the budget goes to business as usual. So their paid campaigns or social media campaigns. 20% goes to testing maybe a new channel. Let's say you're a B2B company and you want to test TikTok, for example. 20% of your budget would go to that. And 10% is this out of the box ideas, whatever you want to experiment with, then the budget for 10% gets allocated towards that.
Right.
So I've seen that model in many organizations because it helps to fund the actual initiatives they're doing. And I think most larger organizations tend to start small. So they often start with a small pilot project, maybe about $5,000 to $10,000, and then say, okay, does this work? Do we scale it up, or do we just chalk it up as an experiment if it doesn't go well? Right? So this constantly a testing and optimizing, and now you have access to all the Linux analytics. You can see what's working, what's not working. But I think the challenge for most marketers, especially in B2B, is there's no 100% attribution. I mean, you can't track every single aspect, particularly if, you and I are catching up on WhatsApp or LinkedIn message. Obviously, there's no way for marketers to track that.
True.
So this is something to keep in mind. While, we can test some of these parameters, measure it, we have to realize that there's some metrics that just cannot measure accurately.
That's a really interesting insight. When you said $5,000 to $10,000, was that also because that's the minimum amount to yield useful insights, you think? Or
so that's a very good question. So it often goes back to procurement. So procurement, if you're looking with an outside organization, let's say an agency, they will have a threshold in which you would look at. So if you're working with external parties, you would have maybe whatever that threshold is, 5,000, 10,000. If it's an internally run initiative, then you don't necessarily have that threshold. You can start with whatever you would like to.
Right. Okay, that's a really good nuance for anyone who's marketing to B2B marketers and companies. This is a useful tip, right? Know the threshold and market accordingly. All right. What I found interesting was that you started your career leading PR and communications first, right? I believe it was a role was it in Weber Shandwick?
Yes, yes. Prior to that, I did start in journalism.
Oh, wow.
That
I didn't know.
Yes.
Okay.
So prior to starting at Weber and some of the other PR communications firms, I worked as a journalist in Tianjin, China.
Wow.
So I was covering business news, and then I also became a food critic covering restaurants and nightclubs as well, too.
That is so interesting.
So yes, that was my foray into pure journalism, and then after that moved into the communications field where I managed accounts like Nike, Mercedes-Benz, MasterCard, and so on.
That is so interesting. I need tips on how to be a food critic, so we'll chat separately later.
Yes.
Yeah, a paid food critic is my dream.
A paid food critic, yes.
Yeah, okay. But going back to, again, your career, starting with PR and comms before moving into marketing, I think a lot of people still treat those as separate worlds, right? What unique value does each bring, and how do you think brands should bridge the two effectively today?
So it's a good question. I think they should be together. I think in most organizations, comms and marketing should be working together because For me, marketing is the big umbrella. Comms is a piece under that, right? So we look at general communications. If you look at traditional communications, you're looking at PR, media outreach. That is definitely one of the key channels, whether it's marketing or comms related. That's still really, really important, particularly in our part of the world. So for me, the advantage of starting in comms versus starting in marketing is in comms, you're taught how to tell a good story, right? You're taught how to do messaging and so on.
Right.
And I think that while we're taught that in marketing, I think we often get, too excited about channels and new technologies that we often forget the fundamentals when it comes to storing telecommunications. So I'm very fortunate that that's where I started my career. So it was much easier for me to transition to marketing and help them because I already had some good foundations.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you see that changing to some extent? Because now that so many people find comms so accessible, I think with tools like ChatGPT, right? Oftentimes, maybe it's the strategic insight behind the comms that's perhaps going to be the unique differentiator, right? Do you feel things have changed, now or lately?
Absolutely. I think everyone is using AI both positively and not so positively. I think most people, everybody wants a shortcut, right? So many people are just saying, hey, ChatGPT, write some messaging for XYZ. So it's fine, but you still need someone who has the context in terms of that particular industry, that particular audience, that ChatGPT won't necessarily get unless you really prime it really well.
Right.
So I think that's one part. The other part is building up what I call the muscle, right? Before you jump into starting a marathon, you need to build that muscle, right? So for me, the muscle when it comes to communications is copywriting, messaging frameworks, and so on. So for me, it's easier for me to, for example, work with AI because I know all the different proven frameworks. I played around with them for the past, 2 decades.
Right.
So I think unless you have that experience and you jump straight into AI, you miss a big opportunity. And I think this is why we're seeing so much AI slop and so much just generic content that's being pushed out because there's no tweaking, there's no nuances for an actual human being.
Wow, I think that was a useful tip. And I agree. I see so much of that AI slop, as you said. Yeah. So, speaking of AI, right, what are some of the most effective AI use cases you've seen, especially since you've been advising some of many firms, really, right, from tech to others, that you've seen that actually move the sales needle?
Very good question. I use it in my organization on the marketing and sales side.
Okay.
But I combine different elements of me. So I think most people, once again, this is a negative use case, and I'll show a positive one.
Okay.
So a negative use case would be, hey, reach out to this, write me an outreach message to so-and-so, right?
Yeah.
Not the best message.
Okay.
Way in which I'm doing it is still bringing in the human element.
Okay.
So for me, I'm bringing in, on the marketing side, elements of who I am. So I watch a lot of movies. I listen to a lot of music. So I will bring in pop culture, my own personality with AI and form them into, amalgamation of all that.
Right.
And I'll give you a great example. Maybe we can have an image of it.
Yeah.
But I like the movie The Godfather.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was trying to promote the upcoming season of my podcast.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, what would we call it? The Podfather.
Oh, that's
And
cute, yeah.
so I basically took the poster of The Godfather, the original one,
Right.
using AI, replaced my face
Right.
with that.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting because it not only changed the text identically, but it also changed, if you look at the original one, it's the hands moving it. It changed it to a microphone.
Oh, okay.
When the Podfather. So it did a really good job.
Right.
But I tell people the idea came from me.
Yeah.
It was basically my interest, my personality. So I put that up on LinkedIn. It went viral. People went crazy for it because it's a bit cheeky. It's who I am, my personality.
That's
right?
nice, yeah.
But it's still leveraging AI.
Yeah.
So that's on the marketing side.
Right.
On the sales side, I try to do the same thing.
Okay.
I integrate many different aspects of things that I, read, psychology, neuroscience, to marry the two. So for example, for mine, I personally have about 100 psychological triggers that I've used to program my AI and my own kind of best practices, along with, once again, the best of AI. So I'm basically marrying multiple fields into one system.
Interesting.
And I think that has worked because I'm not getting rid of the human element. It still has my personality, my tonality, but it also has, once again, best practices, psychological things that actually move the needle. They're proven for the past, 200 years.
Right.
So historical references I weave into there as well.
How does that look like? I mean, it's a GPT that you built to do sales outreach, was that? And based on certain behaviors?
Yes.
Triggers a certain, okay.
So it basically helps me develop the first message,
Right.
like the first draft message. Now, obviously, you go in there and tweak it and so on, but it makes me a lot more efficient. But at the same time, it's still pulling out the best of me because I've been doing sales for the past 2 decades.
Yep.
And then combining that with, what I know about AI and how to prompt it and how to configure it in the right manner with the best sales copywriters, ad people from throughout history, right? So I have a bit of David Ogilvy wiggled in there. There's, some Steve Jobs. There's some Socrates. There's multiple people that I think are influential when it comes to influencing, when it comes to sales.
Yeah.
So I have them as my advisors, me plus AI all working together in one system.
So interesting. Is this available for public use, or it's more your own internal?
It's currently my own. Maybe I productize it, but yes, currently it's my own.
I
my own
see.
system.
I mean, this would be a perfect opportunity if you ever plan to test it out, public beta test of some sort. Yeah.
Yes. I am testing with my team members, but yes, it would be worthwhile opening up to the public one day.
Wow. Yeah. Exciting. And I like how, you embedded, I guess, a different field, right? Psychology and understanding human behavior. Because ultimately we're all humans and you want to be able to connect in order to then add value, right? Or
exactly.
Yeah.
One more thing that I added into there. There's this wonderful book called The Culture Map. And basically it's looking at the way we communicate across different cultures.
Okay.
So I have also weaved that philosophy into it. So as we all know, when we're marketing to people or selling to people in China versus Singapore versus Vietnam and so on, there are other cultural differences.
Yep.
Even within larger markets. So I used to live in China before this. The way you would sell to someone in Tianjin versus Beijing versus Shanghai is very, very different. Right. So weaving in those deep cultural insights, combining that with psychology, neuroscience, history, technology is where the convergence that I'm playing around with currently.
That is so exciting, especially since one of the main criticisms that comes for AI or on AI is that it's not necessarily culturally nuanced, right? It's possibly based on big data that's out there and possibly dominated by the Western world and missing a big chunk of the world, the rest of the world.
Yes.
Right?
So adding on to that, it is, well, we'll use ChatGPT as an example because most people use that. It is very American centric from the language it uses, the spelling, but also the advice it gives.
That's right, yeah.
So I didn't realize because I grew up in the US and the way we give feedback is a certain style. But I was reading books like The Culture Map and reading other things. I realized, for example, in the Netherlands, what works in the US would not necessarily work there, for example.
Yep.
But because, once again, the systems are trained to be more US centric, you do see that influencing its responses.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I argue could be dangerous over the long term because one, misalignment of marketing and sales.
Right.
The greater picture I look at is society, the impact on society.
Yes,
do we
absolutely.
end up missing a part of who we are by relying solely on AI?
That's true, yeah. An interesting conversation for sure, and I'm sure hopefully all the LLMs developers will consider moving forward more the cultural nuances and its importance. That's a very good tip to, rather a good lead into the next question. What are some of your tips to nailing a regional marketing role in APAC?
So that's a very good question because I think for the past decade or so, more than a decade, I've been doing regional marketing. So one thing that is imperative is understanding the different markets, right? I think I came from it from a different lens. And this was, once again, my own naivety when I was starting is I was like, okay, I was successful in mainland China. We broke it up into different regions. But then I didn't understand, for example, Southeast Asia before I came to Singapore, how wildly different it is. Even within Singapore, the mix of different cultures and things we have. So one thing that's really helpful is if you have been either exposed to those, you've either traveled there, you've worked there, you have language skills. So funny enough, I was almost hired, well, they gave me an offer, a Fortune 500 company when I first came to Singapore because I could speak Mandarin. And it seems silly now looking back at it now, but because I understood the language, I understood the market, they were willing to give me an opportunity.
Right.
So I tell my students, I tell executives, it's very difficult unless you've been on the ground, right? Because Google and ChatGPT will help you to some extent.
Yeah.
But for me, I travel all the time for work, and you really get a sense of a pulse of a city, a pulse of a different type of people, what they like, what they don't like. So I think that's honestly the key thing is, do you have cultural awareness across the key markets? First step is to understand, if I was applying for a job, where exactly is my employer targeting? Because we say Asia Pacific or APAC. In reality, they're not targeting every country. It's impossible. Right? So I would ask, if I was interviewing and saying, hey, what are the key markets you're looking at? Is it, Vietnam, Thailand? Are you looking at Indonesia, China, and so on? Right? And then you can then parlay that back to your experience. Right? Because for me, APAC, such a massive region.
Right.
The other part is, I think, connecting all the dots, right? So one thing that I found very helpful when I was at LinkedIn is how we prioritize regional marketing.
Right.
And it sounds very simple now, but it was very, very effective. Is one of my colleagues developed basically this table, and it had all of our key markets. Let's say it was Thailand, Vietnam, and so on. Markets on the left side, and then pain points on the other side of the matrix. So it was a very simple, basically check the box and say, okay, in Thailand, they're struggling with this one, problem 3, problem 4, and then problem 6. And then after we did that exercise, we would have basically count which one had the most pain points in that specific market. That helped us prioritize our go-to-market strategy. And then that way, if we go back to the boss and say, why did you end up going with this regional marketing strategy? Well, we could say that 4 out of 5 of the countries that we were targeting are struggling with this pain point. So it was this very simple framework table that we used internally to align on our go-to-market, but then to make the case to our management team. If they asked, why would you go with that? The third tip I would give is to obviously make friends with people from those markets, right? So when you're doing this in real life, whether you're B2B, for example, you're going to have to make really, really good friends with the country manager in those departments. That's usually the head of sales, right? So this is going to be an understated skill that's really important. Because I'll share in a little bit, once again, things that go wrong when you don't have those relationships in place.
Right. Wow. Okay. I can vouch for some of them in my limited regional marketing experience. I think friendship and relationship goes a long way for sure, right? In sharing things openly and building trust for effective impact. But, going back to that marketing role for newbies or fresh graduates even, I think maybe they would struggle a little bit, right? Because they may not have, for example, the relevant experience or even the opportunity to travel maybe across the region. What then would be an interesting way to show, some degree of interest, curiosity, as well as the potential to do well in those roles?
That's a very good question. We actually got some interesting advice from one of our recent guest speakers who is talking about consume the entertainment culture from that particular region, right? And so I didn't even realize that I was doing this. When I was living in China, I lived with Koreans. So basically we listen to K-pop music, we would watch K-dramas.
Right.
And so even though I had not been to Korea yet, I still had a sense in terms of, their sense of humor, their sense of style, their personality, because I consumed, once again, their content.
Right.
So her advice, which I think was very smart, is don't necessarily look at the influencers, but look at the sports figures, the musicians, the movies and TV that they're watching.
Right.
Consume that because you will get at least a decent sense in terms of how the people think, what they like and don't like. So that's something that I did that I recommend for my students and other folks.
That's a great hack. So Netflix for the win.
There you go.
Yeah, for everybody. Great. So the next question is really, something that ties in very nicely with our topic today, the multi-hyphenated marketer. You've worn many hats, obviously. You're a content strategist, an educator, consultant, podcaster, and now author, right? So what does it really mean to be a multi-hyphenated marketer today? And why do you think it is becoming essential?
So that's a very good question. I think it's going to become more and more important as jobs change, right? So in my parents' generation, they would work for the same company for 20 years.
Right.
My generation, we'd probably average 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
That's becoming less and less. Layoffs are becoming easier and easier. So what I try to do is think of my career kind of like I think of my investments, diversification.
Right.
So I learned this the hard way. Several years ago, I was laid off.
Right.
And all my source of income was from that job. So I lost my job. I had a newborn and I was like, oh my gosh, how do I pay the bills?
Yeah.
And it was a very terrifying situation at the
I
time.
can understand. Yeah.
So looking back, I said, okay, what could I have done differently? So part of that was having diversified income streams, right? So for me, like I said, I teach, I consult, I advise, I build products like books, basically anything, because everything is like a lever, even the businesses that I've had.
Right.
Some months they go up incredibly high. Some months they don't go as high.
Right.
Because of the way the markets change, because of, just certain factors that are outside of our sphere of influence, sphere of our control. So I think this is something that I encourage all people to do, whether you're, a student or a fresh graduate or even executive, because I think many executives come to me nowadays and they're saying, oh, how do I teach? Or how do I coach? Or how do I do something? And so for me, the earlier you get that exposure, the easier it is. Because let's say you've been in the corporate world for, 20, 30 years, and you're looking to start your own business.
Yep.
Not to say it's impossible, but it's a lot more challenging than they think because of many different variables.
Yep.
Right? So that's why I encourage people, if you have the time, start some of this stuff early. Even better if you're a student. I encourage all my students to start at least one business while they're in school.
Wow. Okay.
I was a weird kid where at the age of 17, I produced and ran a TV show.
Oh.
A sketch comedy show. I had about 5 internships when I was in college and I was working full time.
Right.
So if I can do it, basically anyone can. But I think the key here is not to rely on one specific employer for your livelihood.
Right.
Because as we've seen in recent years, it's very dangerous.
Yes, indeed it is. Yeah. Okay. So speaking of which, linked to that multi-hyphenated marketer, the marketing landscape itself has evolved quite quickly. How do you decide which skills to build next in order to emerge as a future-proof marketer?
So I think the easiest answer would be AI for that. And I think AI is extremely important. But then on the flip side of that, I look at what are some of the things that AI can't do, right? You have to build both muscles.
Yeah. But when you say AI, though, is it the ability to prompt?
I think very good question.
Yeah.
So I do a lot in terms of AI education for corporate students now.
Yep.
And the biggest, I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but misconception I see is how they think about AI. So I'll give you a great example. One, every time I'm asked about AI, I'm always asked, oh, what tools do you use? And I'm like, well, I can tell you, but for me, I always look at the question is, what is the use case that I'm using it for? From a business, how am I using this to improve my supply chain or, improve my conversion rates, right? So that is a specific use case. And then that is tied to specific tools.
Right.
Versus what many people do is they think, okay, what's the perfect prompt or what's the perfect tool? And I said, there isn't really a perfect tool or perfect prompt. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
And then working backwards from there. So I think that systematic approach is something that I'm trying to instill in organizations and students rather than the prompting part. Because I think the prompting part is important, but it's not as important until you figure out what you're actually trying to do with AI.
Okay, fair point. Yeah, I see what you mean. The next question is on B2B marketing, right? So what are some emerging trends that a B2B marketer ought to look out for or embrace?
Very good question. I think marketers in general, and this is my own rant here, is we often get excited by the big shiny new things, shiny bell syndrome.
Yep.
Right? And I think AI is obviously the case currently. All, B2B companies are trying to use it from nurturing to research and insights and so on, which I think is great. But I think what I often go into many organizations, these are massive, successful organizations, and I ask them simple things like, who is your target audience? What is your objectives for this quarter? How are you going to measure success? Because for me, unless you kind of nailed those, the other stuff is going to basically, you're missing the mark, right? You're pointing it, but you're pointing at the wrong bullseye, essentially. And I see this a lot.
Wow. Yeah.
In many, many large organizations. So for me, while I highly encourage a lot of my clients and partners and so on to test these tools, I also encourage them to go back to the basics, go back to the marketing fundamentals and seeing, once again, very basic things. Who are we targeting this quarter? What are we trying to achieve? How does this tie back to the business? All of these things that, once again, we learn in school, but we forget about the longer we stay in there.
Why do you think that's the case? I'm so curious as to why so many of us have somehow lost the fundamentals or keep it in view. Yeah.
I tell my students, because this goes back to human psychology, is we are all drawn to instant gratification, instant pleasure. And for many of us, the instant pleasure is, what is that new tool I can try? Or what is that new channel I can experiment with?
Right.
That is honestly the fun part.
Right.
If I go back to what I teach my students, what is target audience? What is the business metrics? What is positioning? I wouldn't say those are necessarily fun activities, right? They're not something that you would generally enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Right. So that obviously, it goes back to a long-term gratification. So we're all, wired to look after short-term pleasures. In this case, it's the quick hit of dopamine when we try a new tool, we create a new video with AI. We're like, wow. But then if it's not aligned back to what we're doing or our role or our KPIs, for me, it's not necessarily a waste of time, but it's not as effective as we could be.
Right. True. Okay. I do want to talk about your book, right? How to Get a Job in Asia. So in today's job climate, I can imagine obviously the immense value that will bring. Could you share one key takeaway as to why everyone should take note or everyone should take note of when trying to find a job in Asia?
Yes. So maybe I can zoom out and share why I created the book. So when I first came to Singapore, I found it incredibly difficult to get a job. I had no friends, no family, no connections, etc. So I applied for job after job, got rejected after rejection.
Yeah.
And eventually I found out, not a hack, but a way of thinking about job hunting differently. And point blank, I stole it from the Chinese, this concept of guanxi, this concept of building relationships.
Right.
That is how I've gotten every single job for the past 20 years. I tell my students I haven't applied for an actual job in over a decade.
I know. I saw that. Yeah. I'm so impressed.
I mean, it's not rocket science, but I think that this is the reason I created the book, is because I saw my students do the same thing, right? They would message me and saying, I've been sending, one student sent 300 applications, zero response. And I said, with the way that AI is getting involved in the interview process, going through the traditional system is becoming more and more challenging, because oftentimes a bot or an AI is reviewing your application before you even get it to it. So my approach is, and the fundamental basis of the book is around networking, building relationships, because those are one things that obviously AI can't necessarily do. Right. So for me, the approach that I take is finding people, starting with people versus brands. Because the big mistake I made and many of my students make is chasing, once again, big fancy brands. We all want to join the Googles of the world. We want to join. There's something wrong with that. But to get the likelihood of getting into one of those companies is incredibly low, especially now. So what I tell them instead is to go to whatever social media platform you like, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, doesn't matter. Start following people you admire. This is the thing that I have done over the years, and how I've built a network of, when I was in journalism, the best writers around the world. When I was in comms, the best communicators around the world. Now it's the best marketers and educators and business leaders around the world. It's simply because I take this approach and I reach out to them and say, hey, I'm really fascinated by your work because, and this is the keyword that I tell my students, use the word because. Because I don't know how many messages I get. They say, oh my gosh, I'm so impressed by your career. Love your work. And then I'm cheeky. I always reply, why? Which part of that? Nothing. And I'm like, okay, that was obviously an automated message.
Right. Yeah.
So by adding that keyword, because in your networking messages, makes a massive difference. Because everyone likes to be generally complimented, generally heard. And it works across the board. So I'll give an example. I was reaching out to a CMO, and this was on behalf of one of my students. They said, we'd love to have this person come speak, right? So I basically forwarded that message that sent saying, hey, look at the kind words this person has about you, the admiration and so on. Obviously, that person, once again, melted their heart, right? Because they could see the genuine interest from the other person. And I think this is obviously something that, once again, AI cannot come in and say, oh, I love you because, XYZ, right? That has to come from the individual.
Right.
So that approach, finding people that you are genuinely interested in, admire, trying to ask for advice. So I do this all the time. Actually, not as often as I should, but I highly encourage it for my students, younger executives. Reach out to people and say, hey, I'm looking to break into blah, 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 right? I would, once again, impressed by your career because you did blank, would love to find out how you did it, right? Simple things like that.
Right.
Because many people like to share their advice, especially the higher ups. The higher you go, the more they love to share their advice and wisdom and everything with the next generation. So just to summarize, I think making the shift from applying for jobs to building genuine relationships with people you admire, you want to work with, that for me is the key. And the book is essentially a summary of all of my students over the years who have sent me messages saying, hey, I tried this, it's worked out. So honestly, once again, kudos goes to the students for writing the book, because many of them, not only students, but executives, I interviewed mid-level and senior executives and say, how do you build relationships? What is your approach? Especially if you're entering a new market, right? Because it's how to get a job in Asia, not just in Singapore.
Right.
So, how to do it in Vietnam, how to do it in Hong Kong. The principles are the same, but I have people at different levels sharing their experiences, what works, what doesn't work. And that's essentially the book.
Nice. Yeah. It sounds a lot like, at the end of it all, you need to be a decent human being, right? You must genuinely also want to like people and care about them and be humble enough to ask for help sometimes.
Yes. And I think even once again, what you're doing, I mean, we obviously have this relationship now since I've been on your podcast and so on. So I also tell my students, start a podcast if you can, or a blog or any kind of series. But I think you're basically showcasing it right now.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it pays a lot to get a compliment from the original OG of podcasting and marketing. Yeah. Okay. On that note, would you have any, words of advice for aspiring marketers? You've spoken a lot already, I think, about, trying to dabble in a few things, starting your own podcast. But I guess any other last few words, for them who are aspiring to make their mark in today's fast-paced world?
Yes, I think don't wait on anybody else. Get your hands dirty. Build your own website, build your own social media platform, build your own app, whatever it is. It's so easy to do this nowadays. The reason I say that is for two different reasons. One of which goes back to my message earlier, build your muscle. Don't wait for someone to give you a job. Don't wait for someone to give you an internship. Do not wait for anybody.
Right.
Do that yourself in your spare time. The technology is there. The other advantage of that is building your portfolio, right? Many marketers say, okay, how do I get a job? Particularly if I'm, in school. I said, do you do reports? Yes. Do you do presentations? There's your portfolio. That's it, right? So that is what many employers are looking for, right? They're looking for someone, doesn't matter if you're a fresh graduate or executive, can you come in and hit the ground running, right?
Right.
That is what they're looking for. And if you can go to an employer and you say, hey, I built this website, we have 1,000 followers or 1,000 visitors each day, or whatever it is. Doesn't have to be massive numbers, but just something to show them that you've made some kind of impact, and also you're willing to learn. This is something I think for the younger generation, I'm constantly trying to encourage them is, the skills and everything can be taught. Your attitude, your desire, your hunger to learn, we can't teach you that. Right. So build those skills, build that attitude first, and then it's much easier if you get hired.
That is so interesting. Do you see that as a gap with our Gen Zs?
I think it's a mixed bag.
Okay.
I think it's a mixed bag. I think many of my students and younger folks are very entrepreneurial. So I'll ask them, how many of you have started a business or side hustle? At least a third of the hand goes up.
That's pretty good, yeah.
So once again, it happened recently. We had one of my students sharing a business he was working on, trying to pitch it to. We had a VC in the room. He's pitching it to them. I was like, that's great.
Yeah.
So yes, I do see them being entrepreneurial, but once again, it's something it's encouraged for everybody to start.
Okay. I think, we can end on that note. I think it's been a really enriching, podcast episode. I really appreciate your time and openness to sharing. Thank you so much, Joe. And I look forward to sharing this with everyone.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you so much.